Hello, my name is Mike Trung, and I'm the Executive Director of the Office of Innovative Teaching Technology at Azusa Pacific University. In this video, I will be talking about developing meaningful assessments. This is part of the unit that we are focusing on developing your first lesson in the LMS. In an earlier part of this section, we looked at how to use the online course blueprint template as a way to build your unit. And as you do that, one of the things that you'll have to do is to think about the assessment piece. These are things that these are activities, learning activities that will assess whether or not your students are getting what you expect from them. So let's get started. When you're thinking about developing meaningful learning assessments, there are two types of test items that generally uh, faculty think about. One is the idea of objective items. These require students to have a correct response, whether it's fill in the blanks or a multiple choice or true false. These are kind of the objective items that you can test their knowledge on. Another type of test item is what they call subjective or essay items. And these items allow students to organize and to present original answer. So it could be a short answer essay, it could be an extended response essay, it could be problem solving, let's say in certain fields like STEM or math where they're solving a word problem or some sort of situation and they have to kind of work the answer out. And there's also performance test items. So in some of the performative disciplines, music or dance or some of the other things that require some sort of performative aspect, that's where you're also testing. So with objective items, you have multiple choice, true, false, matching, completion. And then with subjective items, you have short answers, extended response essays, and problem solving. So here are some tips on how to think through some of these items. So objective items can be correctly answered through blind guessing. So in some respects, objective items are not may not be an authentic test because students can essentially guess the answer. Subjective or essay items emphasize written communication skills. So in order for students to do well, their written communication skills have to be somewhat developed, and that could advantage certain students over other students. And essay items are generally easier and less time consuming to construct than most objective test items, but they require more time to grade. So while essay items could be a very short and explain how this theory works, but then when you get the response back from your students, it may take some time to grade, whereas multiple choice tests might be easy to grade because it could be automated, but to create a very well written multiple choice can actually take more time. But regardless of which type of test items you use, when constructed well, it does provide a good device for measuring student learning. Here are some general tips that I've got from the short guide for effective test writing. This is in your part of your required reading, so I'm just pulling some of the highlights from the reading. So think about the length of the test. How long will it take? And this in some ways will determine the number of questions you can ask. If you ask, you can ask obviously more objective test questions than you can subjective or essay questions. You want to be as clear and as concise as possible in your instruction because oftentimes in a test situation it's already high stakes, so you don't want to create any kind of confusion by being unclear about what you're expecting. You want to also mix it up, maybe have a little bit of objective and a little bit of subjective items so that you can provide a variety for different types of things you're looking for. You want to also test early when possible. Within maybe the first 2 or 3 weeks of your class, you might want to have some sort of quiz, some maybe a formative or some sort of low stakes exam so that you can get a better idea upfront whether or not your students are understanding the material. Uh, you also might want to consider testing more often. Instead of waiting for midterms and finals, you might want to do it every week. I used to, teach writing, and there's a lot of readings involved with that. And what I used to do is do weekly quizzes based on the readings, and that kind of kept the students um, up to date in terms of the reading and making sure that they're supposed to do what they're supposed to do. There's also this idea of making sure the way you write your test is accurate. Sometimes some responses may be unclear, and so it's good to kind of check for that. It's maybe ask a, a peer colleague to be able to look at it and just to see what they think. Proofing the exam is part of that. Asking your somebody else to kind of take a look at the exam after you've created it just to make sure everything is in order. Uh, this idea of one wrong answer is that you don't want your exam to have multiple questions based on one response. So for example, if question one is asking for a particular answer, and that answer is what you're basing on in subsequent questions, that's not what you want, because if they miss the first question, then they will miss the subsequent question. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. Special considerations. Those could be, students who have test anxieties or have some sort of accessibility disability needs, and that's where you might want to give extra time or provide different kinds of exam, and so you might want to create different versions of it for those particular types of situations. And then finally, it's always good to have a little fun with your exam, so a little humor, a little bit of just comment that kind of personalizes the exam a little bit might be a good way to help ease your students' anxiety during their exam. And finally, here are some resources for developing meaningful assessments. I mentioned this first resource. Is this a trick question? It's a short guide to writing effective test questions. And this is produced from Kansas State Department of Education. It is a very, very good resource, and I highly recommend you spend some time reading through, and they have lots of examples in there. There's also this resource from Indiana University on how to write better tests, and they essentially give you some ideas of how to construct meaningful and uh, better tests so that you can get more out of your students. And then finally, preparing effective essay questions. Oftentimes, faculty struggle with how to write essay questions for students, and this is a great guide for that. And this is something that you can use to add to your objective items. And so we hope all these items you will take a look at it closely in the resources section, and we will talk to you later. Bye bye.